Welcome everybody. I see people coming in. The attendees list goes up. So we're going to wait a few minutes until the count up stops going so rapid. We are having some mild technical issues, but we are fixing them. In the meantime, I'm very happy that Ashwin, Kamal, and Emily are here. I see people coming in. You do me a great favor to say hi in the chat and let me know you're here so I can welcome you. If you're just let me know who you are, where you're from, that would be great. And I can see that they're actually real people. Hi, Walter. Thank you for joining. Great to have you. Walter is from Wageningen University and studying the use of byproducts from palm oil. We have Natalie, an academic from the UK. Thank you, Natalie, for joining. Welcome to you. Hi, Kono. Welcome to you. Marike, my own colleague from Solidaridad. Oh dear, I know I need to do something. Hi, Afi from Sime Darby in the Netherlands. Welcome to you. And I see Janie from Malaysia. Wow, Dylan from New Foresight. Welcome to you. Jaydeep from Bungie. Welcome. Oh, I need to do something now. Sorry, guys. Owen. Great. Hi, Lisa from Solidaridad. Margot from Sime Darby. Gifty from Cargill. Welcome to you. And Ranjit from India, on the palm oil mission from India. Welcome to you. Okay. Well, I think we're solving our technical difficulty. Our technical difficulty is that Christine Snyder from Henkel, we couldn't get her camera right. So my technical colleagues are fixing that in the back. In the meantime, hi, Rosemary. Welcome to you. Thank you for joining. Yeah, so we'll be starting shortly. We've checked the Q&A function. The chat works, so that's great. Guys, there's also, the technical team. There's also the Q&A function, right? And there we can vote up the questions. So yeah. Irene from the Spanish Sustainable Palm Oil Foundation, welcome to you. Yep. So it's 5 after 10 and I'm going to start this webinar and stop rambling. So welcome everybody to today's SPOC webinar, Progressing Sustainable Palm Oil in Europe. What's the latest in challenging times? My name is Marike Leegwater and I'm extremely honored to host this webinar. This time we'll talk about the state of play regarding the uptake of sustainable palm oil in Europe, understand the challenges and how to overcome them and how to move forward. I'm honored that I'm joined by so many expert people today and in particular also expert speakers. We have Emily Fripp, Director of Ethica and a leading consultancy in the sphere of sustainable raw materials, and author of recent reports on the uptake of sustainable palm oil in Europe. So I'm really happy she can set the scene and kick us off. We have Kamal Seth, recently become the new global palm lead at WWF, and before that, the RSP outreach manager, India and China, so a very relevant person in this debate. We have, or soon we'll have, Christine Snyder, the palm specialist at global consumer goods company Henkel, and really a company that's leading the way. And we have Ashwin Selvaraj of RSPO, ex-head of smallholders and now responsible for the outreach and engagement of RSPO in China and India. And Ashwin, I'm very happy to have you here on board in your new role. Each speaker will give an 8-minute introduction on the topic, and we'll have the rest of the time for open discussion. Before we get started, just to inform, all of you can use the Q&A function. And if you put questions, I will put them to the speakers. You can also upvote questions by others. Please do that because it helps me to see what are the most relevant topics. And please note the Spock webinars are super informal. So yeah, please do ask your questions as we go along. I may pick them up even to see we can all interrupt the speakers and make sure we make this dynamic and insightful. Well, I've seen the participant list, so I know you are a number of real deep experts in the room, so please don't hesitate to speak up, and I really look forward to your sharp questions and comments. And yeah, we can all learn from it, I hope. So the session will be recorded, so we place it on the Spock website. For the people unable to join, I see we are heading nearly 50 participants now, so that's nice. And with that introduction, I would like to give the floor to Emily to take it away. Emily, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I'm just share my slides and then away we go. But are we happening yet? There we go. Lovely, brilliant. Thank you, Marika. Thank you, everybody at Spock for joining and for asking us to speak today. So I'm Emily Fripp, Director of Ethica, and we are a small group of technical experts that we work in the space, as Marika has explained, of sharing market information, developing it, and particularly we facilitate the UK Sustainable Commodities Initiative with roundtables on palm oil and soya, and increasingly working other forest risk commodities, so timber, pulp, paper, cocoa, etc. So my task today is to provide a brief introduction to what's going on in Europe and what's in setting that in the scene of a global context and global markets, and how does this all come together, and importantly, what is our role, what's our influence then as the UK. So if we look at this slide here, what I want to show you, and I know my fellow panelists are also going to delve into the detail on the numbers, so I'm more interested in the picture that this shows. And to me, this really highlights the fact that that Europe plus UK, if I'm allowed, we account for 11 to 12% of global use of palm oil. And whilst that's been increasing, we'll see that I sort of feel that it's probably going to taper off. It's fairly steady in the last couple of years. However, where do we fit within the rest of the world and the rest of the world context here? You can see Indonesia rapidly increasing. The rest of the world, everything else not on this slide, increasing. India, significant. China going up, Malaysia. But interestingly, when you look at Pakistan, Thailand, Nigeria, Bangladesh, they're also growing and expanding in their use. So what this really shows to us is in Europe, we're small, we're sort of significantly already covered by some form of certified sustainable palm oil, whether that's through RSPO, or whether it's also in addition with an NDPE policy, a no deforestation, no peatland, no exploitation policy. So we're reasonably all right in what we bring in and what we're doing. We're not perfect, there's more we can do in Europe, but where we sit within the rest of the world and how do we take that good, strong work that we're doing in Europe to help influence the rest of the world. And I don't mean influence through a top-down, colonial, do it our way, or leave the market. How do we engage and work collaboratively with everybody if we're going to change the global production and consumption of palm oil? There's really no point in us having 11% of global production pretty much covered by RSPO, while the rest of the world is sort of growing and evolving and continuing to use palm oil perhaps sustainably or unsustainably. So how do we use our position of influence? But what else is sort of going on in the European market? And this sort of slide hopes to show that in terms of food, feed and oleochemicals, we're reasonably static and actually sort of slightly declining over the years. Biofuel and sort of bioenergy, that's been increasing. Although we know that the EU has a renewable energy directive coming in, which is going to sort of force a little bit of a phase out of palm oil. That's a bit of an ambition, you know, so you could see that declining, that use of palm oil in biofuels is likely to start coming down. It isn't at the moment, but we expect it to taper off and fall away, which means overall as Europe, we're potentially going to be declining. At best, we're going to be static. But at sort of the other position is that we begin to decline. So how do we use our role? How do we influence as a global buyer, maintaining that importance? Where do we go from this? That's what I sort of would like to sort of us think about. And again, it's a sort of, we've all talked about clean supply chains, then a complete clean supplier base, but that's still about supplying what comes into Europe. And we need to influence and change the production and behavior of other markets. And when we think about Indonesia and it's a major producer, it's also a major consumer. And the sort of regions of Africa are major consumers. So how do we share lessons as a consumer with other consumer markets and those consumer markets that are producers? So if we sort of think about, that's our position in the global stage, but it's a pretty complicated and challenging time at the moment. The last 2-3 years have seen immense challenges. Everybody on this call, I'm sure, is involved, impacted. I don't think anybody cannot be impacted. We've had backlog supply chain disruptions following the COVID pandemic globally, which has led to labour shortages in Malaysia and in Indonesia. We've got changing EU regulations. We've got export caps going on in Indonesia. So, you know, protecting domestic markets, it's happening, that sort of sense of needing to protect. And conflict in Ukraine, we can't understand the horrific situation that is taking place in Ukraine, but the impact that's having on the vegetable oil market is really interesting and relevant and present. I mean, we're all seeing global fats and oils markets becoming short in supply, prices are increasing, companies are looking to switch from being in palm oil to rape or sunflower, or from rape and sunflower, I should say. Sunflower comes from Ukraine and Russia. So where do we switch from that? We're going into rapeseed. Can we go into palm oil? If we're going into palm oil, is it sustainable palm oil or is it unsustainable palm oil? There's lots of conflicting messages we have to manage around this. And there's pressure. The pressure on the supply chain is phenomenal. This is all happening at the same time that there's an increased global attention on climate change and on high-level action. So we've seen at the COP26, the Glasgow Leaders Declaration, CGF, Forest Positive Landscapes, commitments by large corporates, global consumers. We want to do the right thing. We're going to offset our landscape footprints. The finance sector is getting on board, making commitments. So there's this great political drive. There's a pressure on companies and leading trading companies to do the right thing, coupled with people in the supply chain, quite often lower down in the supply chain, your farmers, your manufacturers, your food manufacturers, facing real challenge in what they're going to do. With market volatility, supply disruption, pressure to switch to alternatives. And that in itself, we're seeing more misinformed communications coming out. People saying, well, I've got to move back into palm oil and palm oil's unsustainable, palm oil's bad. So again, with that narrative that we're trying to balance about sustainable palm oil is positive, it can be good for the planet if it's done right. So we've got to juggle all of this going on. So a world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity. This is the term that I know the SPOC team are using, the SPOD team are using for the SPOD meeting in September, but we're still trying to drive forward this global sustainability agenda. And I think that's testament to the work that everybody on this call and in our wider networks is a real testament to them, their efforts, the engagement that we have across industry, that if we can do it now and we can get it to work, then surely we can do it when the world is a slightly easier place to operate in. So this is why we sort of think about how do we turn these challenges into opportunities. I've sort of stressed that I think there's a real need for scale here, to move from this, well, we're all right in Europe, we're sort of pretty much okay on the sustainability front. RSPO is static, perhaps it's been 19% for the last few years. How do we get this to go forward? How do we create balancing our own supply chains, making them all right in Europe, with actually creating genuine impact on the ground? How do we translate that and share those lessons, share that aspiration for sustainable palm oil? Collaboration comes up all the time in every meeting and every dialogue that we've got at the moment. Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. What does that really mean? How do we make it effective? How do we actually make that meaningful? And it doesn't mean do it our way and we'll show you how to do it our way. It means how can we work with producers, with national initiatives? How can we work with the ISPO, the MSPO, RSPO on the ground, form those partnerships? How do we create mass market change in those production landscapes? How do we do that effectively? It's great to have a consistent market message coming from Europe and other consumer countries. Yeah, we're saying, yes, we want palm oil that's produced in the right way, but how do we do it in a way that encourages that change, encourages other markets in producer countries to change? Is there a use here of mass balance? Mass balance is a really important tool for those in the European market involved in oleochemical sector, in the animal feed sector. Is there a way to recognise national schemes like ISPO and MSPO as part of that mass balance tool that RSPO uses? Is there a way to provide a genuine market demand, a need for these national standards, which then will provide the impetus and the encouragement to producers to really change the way they're doing? They're working incredibly hard in Indonesia and Malaysia and Africa through the Africa Palm Oil Initiative to try and move forward and improve the standards to which they're working against. How can we as Europe provide a way to sort of support that, given we're so small? And I think where do we go next? Technology, innovation, all of that. I mean, wow. I mean, you think back to where we were 10 years ago when we started out on this conversation, many of us, it's completely different now. There's an app for everything. There's a Earth observation tool out there. You can, if you want to see it, you can see it. If you want to know what's going on, you can know what's going on. But how do we make that useful information? There's no point in having data just for data's sake. We need data that is useful, data that can be used by everybody, whether you're a producer, a consumer, a policymaker trying to check on best practice, whether you're civil society. How do you do this? How do you use it? Consistent market demand, key. It's happening, it's working on. I've stressed that. We need to sort of ensure that we're moving informed, positive action and working. And my last point, and then I hope I've sort of set the scene enough for you, is global population continues to expand. We're going to see from some of our next speakers about how vast palm oil demand could go. From a point of view in Europe, what's our role in that then? Do we drive an increased production? You know, do we need more and more and more? Because that goes against the demand and the messaging we want in Europe, where actually if we do things better and we increase the yield, we don't need to keep clearing new land and growing more palm oil. Do we really need to do that? Or can, in Europe in particular, but perhaps in other countries, think more broadly about how do we consume less or consume responsibly? How do we waste less throughout the entire supply chain? You hear statistics where 30 to 40% of all agricultural commodities grown is wasted if it's at the point of production through the supply chain, and then in Europe we just throw it away. So how do we use things better, more wisely, and perhaps we don't need to produce as much. And on that note, I will stop and hand back to you, Marika.
Thanks, Emily. That was excellent. And I think some really valuable questions. Also, how can, in particular, Europe, let's say, considering our declining market share, how can we use our role best? What can we do to let's say, stimulate this debate? With that, thank you again. And I would just like to give the floor to Kamal to give a further perspective on that question exactly. How does WWF see our role? Thanks, Kamal. Please go for it.
Thank you, Marika, and thank you, Emily, for setting the scene. That was very useful, and I will try to stick to the time and do this in less than 10 minutes. So allow me to share my screen. So as Marika mentioned, I recently joined as the Global Pharma Lead for WWF, and previously I was doing market transformation efforts for RSPO in India, China, and Asia Pacific in general. I don't think I need to go through much of this. As you might be aware, WWF works across wildlife, forests, freshwater, climate, and energy, different practices, and they're supported by finance, markets, and governance for the last 50 to 60 years. And sustainable palm oil, of course, is an important aspect for us as one of the founding members of the RSPO in 2004. The way we see palm is a part of the food systems which we know are broken. Number one threat to nature. I won't go through all the details here because I think many people here would know this. Agriculture uses 70% of fresh water, nature loss 70%, deforestation 80%. On the other hand, we have producing more for probably 1.5 planets or 9 billion people, but a lot of it goes as waste while we still have obesity. So palm sits in the center of a broken food system in which we are still on the way to make palm and other such essential commodities more sustainable in terms of their production and consumption. If business as usual continues, as you see this graph from the last 50 years approximately, the biodiversity indicator value is something that we really care for deeply over the last 5 decades. It would decline to the point of the extinction of millions of species within our own lifetime. Improved conservation efforts would mean slightly better, but not good enough. So what we really need is conservation plus food transformation working at the same time to go northwards and not south as far as biodiversity indicator value is concerned. I think Marika and also Emily hinted at this one. What is the role of different regions looking at the next couple of decades? So the data right now tells us in 2019, 2020 is about 75, 76 million metric tons, which is the palm oil global production. Whether you like palm or you don't like palm, what is inevitable is the demand in Africa and Asia, which will continue to rise. We can only estimate right now how much of it will be used for biofuels or for other aspects outside of Europe. So we are looking at a range of anywhere between 264 to 447 million metric tons between 2040 to 2050. So if that doesn't wake you up, then I don't know what will, because that's a massive increase that we're going to see, irrespective of our personal choices for palm or any other vegetable oil. Just wanted to put a...
Just yes. Ask, how do you know? How do you find these figures?
We don't as WWF, therefore the source is USDA. This is the data as per the USDA 2019, in which they publish detailed reports about the forecast for palm oil's production and consumption.
Thanks.
In terms of the value itself, just to see the purchasing power, something that Marika mentioned as well, what is going to be Europe's purchasing power of palm oil? So if you look at the export value right now from Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Netherlands, which re-exports, you'll obviously see that India's and China's purchasing power is twice of EU plus UK right now, and it's only going to increase. So India, for example, is likely to spend about $10 billion within this decade itself to meet the demand, and China as well going in the same direction. So in terms of the purchasing power as importing countries, the Asian countries are on the rise, while Europe will stay the same or probably fall in terms of its import value from the producing countries. So therefore shared responsibility, and therefore it cannot be a quick fix to just ask for segregated or identity preserved, as much as we would all love for that situation to be, but no market's ever transformed by a quick fix solution. So we are looking at a phase-wise approach in which there are credits, there is mass balance, and every supply chain has a role to play. And of course, if everything becomes segregated, that's the best place to be in. Why boycott is not a solution? I think some people here might have such ideas. Just to give you some scientific data and facts, palm is of course the most efficient, and therefore how it is produced is where the issue arises, not whether or not it should be produced. So compared to any other veg oils, I won't go into the details. It's about 4 to 10 times more efficient, and therefore what we need to ask for is how can we increase our efforts to mainstream sustainable palm oil production and consumption instead of asking for a boycott, because it would mean producers could have less incentive to produce palm oil. They could be selling it in the leakage markets, which would have lower standards than Europe, or they could switch to alternative oils, which would need more land resources and water resources. There are 3 million plus smallholders who depend on palm oil for their livelihoods across Southeast Asia and South Asia and Africa. 40% of all palm oil is produced by smallholders on an average. So, I mean, for organizations like WWF, this is a no-brainer that we work towards making sustainable palm oil the norm and mainstreaming that instead of looking at alternates, because that would put more pressure on the planet and our natural resources. So what we do since the last 12 years is an biannual exercise, once every 2 years at least, of palm oil by a scorecard in which you would rate X number of companies. So it started with a handful of 59 companies in 2009, which has now grown to 227 companies that were assessed in the last scorecard in 2021. So I'll just show you some of the key numbers that we looked at when we did the last scorecard. So these companies were assessed, which are headquartered in Europe, North America, Australia, Asia, and Africa, 227 of them across 24 countries, across the entire space of animal feed, manufacturers, retailers, food service companies. 134 of such companies assessed are in Europe. So this is not all the companies in Europe that buy palm oil. This is only 134 companies that were assessed. 46 in Asia, 35 in the UK, 8 companies in Africa, and 10 in Australia. So just to give you some context of how the scorecard looks like, and you can see the website palmoilscorecard.panda.org for all the reports. You can go to any of these 227 companies. Some of them are here. These are the top scorers actually, as per the last scorecard. So these are the companies which rate the highest in our latest scorecard, which was published in 2021. And you can go to the individual full reports here. So if you wanted to know about Ferrero, why did they get 21.71 out of 24? You will be able to know the answer to that question. Same for IKEA, same for Mars, Coop, and John Lewis, and overall 227 companies. Coming to Europe specifically, the average score for the companies, 134 of them that we assessed, was 14.2 out of 24. In their own supply chain, European companies got 11 out of 18, and beyond their own supply chains, 3.2 out of 6. So the combination, the average is 14.2, which is what we call middle of the pack as far as the 134 companies that was assessed, which were headquartered in Europe. In terms of the total palm oil volume purchase, this is as per the data available by the end of 2020, so about 6.5 million tons. Which is EU plus UK, 25% approximately segregated, identity preserved, about 1% independent smallholder credits, 31% mass balance, 8% book and claim or mill credits, and 35.26% non-RSPO. So overall, it's about 65% for the 134 companies assessed from Europe and UK in this scorecard. The average score of these 134 companies is 14.22, which is middle of the pack. If you want to know more, we won't have the time today, but definitely you can go back to the website and see the individual scores of those companies. Coming to the countries or EU member countries, some of the countries you will see have 100%. Again, this is for the companies that we assessed who belong to Denmark. So all the companies assessed from Denmark are 100% on RSPO using any of the 4 supply chains. Same for Ireland, and some of the other high scoring countries are the Netherlands, as you see, 83.5%. Some of the lowest ranking ones are like Turkey, 21.94%, or Poland, 36.27%. So it clearly shows a somewhat division between Western Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, in which the Western European countries are slightly more advanced, though countries like Germany are still 75.7%, which is again middle of the pack. So there's just to give you an idea of the EU member states here. What was also quite interesting for us to note is that as much as 30% of palm oil volumes reported by European and North American respondents is still not RSPO certified, a disappointing finding, considering that they are headquartered in mature sustainability markets. Because what we are asking for now is, of course, more action in Asian markets, which are the biggest ones, but also the fact that if they're headquartered in North America or Europe, which already have NDP commitments, they do more for those markets as well as for the Asian markets. While 57% of the European and North American respondents are members of sustainability platforms like RSPO, only 44% are making investments in palm oil producing landscapes. So we are saying that it's not just enough to increase your uptake of certified sustainable palm oil, but also to do beyond certification work at the landscape level, which regenerates nature and gives back to nature instead of just controlling the damage that has been caused in the last few decades. So just to wrap up with the sample of another study we had done, which you can see on the WWF Palm Oil website. We had studied Sabah as an example. Sabah produces about 8% of the global palm oil. And for that landscape, we mapped which countries are buying from Sabah, and then how can these buyers in these countries work with the producers and the exporters in Sabah to make sure that they move towards 100% sustainable palm oil supplies. So I won't go into all the details. I will share the slides with the organizers who can then share that with you. But what we're trying to do here is to map the production landscapes with the consumption markets and then see which are the key actors that we should be working with, whether it's the government, it's the private sector, it's banks and financial institutions or NGOs, to make sure that we have a collaborative approach. And as Emily mentioned, and not as a colonial approach of saying that we know what best to do and we want you to do it. Instead, strike partnerships, be a part of global platforms. There is one that we are building, which is a global network of national sustainable palm oil initiatives. And Emily or I could tell you more about that one if you're interested. So just coming to the recommendations based on our scorecard, we want the companies to take more action in their own supply chains as well as beyond their own supply chains. And that's how we give them the ratings out of 24. So commitments to deforestation, conversion, human rights issues, ambitious time-bound commitments to source 100% RSPO, CSPO, or Palm Oil Innovation Group, which has a handful of advanced companies as well. Purchase from suppliers that have made similar commitments for NDPE and established robust monitoring and verification systems, whether it's satellite monitoring, GPS tracking, so on and so forth. And definitely support policy action in producer and consumer countries for sustainable palm oil and participate in action-oriented initiatives and advocacy. Moving beyond the supply chains in terms of transparency and traceability, we want companies to require suppliers to have traceability to the plantation level, to the fresh fruit bunches. This is something which is also in the RSPO standards, PNC 2018, which is not widely known. There is criteria 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, which already require this, even from the non-certified plantations. So that's something that we want companies to do more, also strengthen and enforce the laws and the policies that prohibit deforestation and ecosystem conversion. So won't go into all the details. You can see more and we can discuss in the later part of the webinar today. Thank you so much. Back to you, Marike.
Thanks, Kamal, for being very precise and quick and sharing loads of information on the scorecard and your results and interesting perspectives on the growth of palm oil that we foresee. I realized I forgot some administration in the beginning. So first point is apologies to all the participants because Catherine Ibarra from Olinex Wilmar at the last moment informed us she couldn't make it today. So I'm very happy that we found Ashwin Selvaraj ready to replace her. Her talk would be about the role of mass balance in the value chain. So yeah, I'm happy that Ashwin can talk about that. The other thing is we have set the time for this webinar at 75 minutes, so 5 quarters. So we will be, yeah, we have some time. And before I give the floor to Christine, I also saw some questions in the Q&A. So as I promised, the SPOC webinar is very informal, and we'll do our best to answer questions. I would like to take them. They're from Gerard Rijk. Thanks, Gerard, for the questions. And the question is, the first one to Emily. What kind of, if I rephrase it right, what kind of opportunities do you see with respect to the leakage markets? And then leakage is the sales of palm oil to less, let's say, markets that are demanding not so much in terms of sustainability. And I'm very happy, Ashwin or Kamal, if you want to comment as well.
Yeah, happy to, Marika, and I think Kamal has also just spoken to this. And I think to really avoid leakage, we have to move away from this idea that Europe and certain markets are demanding sustainable palm oil, and the rest of the world can do what they like. And actually, we've got to sort of think about, how do we change the entire production base? How do we make it so that all palm oil being produced is sustainable? And we can argue over whether ISPO or MSPO is the same standard as RSPO, etc., etc. But ISPO, MSPO, Africa Palm Oil Initiative, FEDEPALMA in Colombia, they are all national laws and processes for palm oil production. So in Indonesia and Malaysia, it's mandatory. In Africa, that's about setting the national laws for sustainable palm oil production. So if we can make it a market opportunity, if we could support that outreach, the rolling out of those national standards, so that the entire supply base is produced to a level that is at least legal and deforestation free, then it means wherever that is then being consumed, whether it's in Europe or whether it's within the country of production or whether it's going to China or India, it doesn't matter. And then we're raising the base, as it were. And then great, if certain markets and certain companies want to go above and beyond that, then that's brilliant. But let's make sure that the whole base and the whole world, sustainable palm oil is the norm. That would be my quick response to that.
Thanks. And what kind of role would you then see for European operators?
Well, I think, and as Kamala said, I think it's about making sure you're operating at a global level. It's about not just what you bring into your supply chains into Europe, but if you're operating in other countries as a consumer or a producer, you have a responsibility to do the right thing in those countries where you're operating. And I think as national initiatives, we need to work with national initiatives, which we're already beginning to do in India and Singapore and China and in Indonesia, Malaysia, and share the lessons that we have of how do you engage with industry? How do you make the market acceptable? How do you work with the market? How do you work with governments to influence the policy of domestic policy? So domestic procurement policies in these key producer countries also has a role to play. There's and engaging with civil society, they have a role to play. It's a multi-stakeholder action, but we need to get out of this mindset of just what we supply into the European market has to be a certain level. How do we get the whole stuff to shift? And I think that's feeds into what Kamal has also been saying.
Do you see any concrete, tangible opportunities for that at this stage?
Yeah, I mean the UK's got its due diligence policy, but it's part of a package of measures that the UK is influencing. We're also doing trade deals for those of us that would be due to a certain thing. But the European Commission's also got a Green Deal. It involves collaborative partnerships. There's a load of initiatives, and then you've got the FACT dialogue, which is the climate change initiative going on. So there's lots of high-level dialogues all the way down to industry dialogues there. So the mechanisms are already there, the information's already there. We just need to make sure we talk about things in a positive and engaging manner, and rather than just always saying, well, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. We have to say, that's great. How can we make it slightly better? how can we work with you to improve that standard?
Thanks, Emily. Question to Kamal. Kamal, what do you believe to be the most promising new developments and tools in the area of improving traceability of palm oil to plantation level?
Very good question. Something that we are working in our labs in WWF. It's under production right now. We would love to see traceability all the way to the plantations, and we have the technology to do it, whether you talk about sunlight monitoring or a mobile application that can work on a basic feature phone like the good old days of the Nokia devices. So we are still working on it. I think that's what we need to see, that all the standards require traceability to the plantation. Of course, it's difficult when you talk about smallholders, because smallholders in some cases have to literally walk on the boundaries of their plots to map the polygon maps or the shapefiles or the GPS coordinates. So it's not easy, but I think what we all want to see is traceability to the plantation. And if you ask me 10 years from now, if every fresh fruit bunch would have like a scanned QR code, and you can scan the code and then you can know which plantation it came from. But we are far from there right now, but that's the ambition, that in about 5 to 10 years, every single fresh fruit bunch can be tracked to the origin.
Thanks, Kamal. With that, a first snapshot of the questions, I would like to move to Christine. Christine, I'm really happy we have you in the room. This was not easy, and you're a little bit far. We tried to improve it, but we couldn't. But still happy you're here. Is it possible for you to share your slides?
Let me try a minute. I can do it up.
Yeah, Christine is in a room, and then the laptop is linked to the room, and then, you know, you're all...
I think if you have access, would be perfect if you could help me out here, do a short favor.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's more easy just because of all those Zoom applications.
There we go.
Go to the screen. So first of all, Marieke, big thank you that you invited me to your high-level expert SPOC panel. So I'm really honored to be here. However, based on so many SPOC meetings you already had, I think there is already a very deep knowledge and understanding. And I'm here to just talk quickly about how does it feel being a corporate company, talking about the corporate perspective, because in the end we are here and we are receiving all those implications and trying to do the best out of it without knowing a lot, and therefore for us it's so crucial and it's so valuable to listen to all of you, to get more and more insights, and also to follow up with the current trends and developments. And then maybe I should quickly say who we are, Marieke. Of course, we know for a long time, but if you please switch to the next slide. I say who we are because I think in the end, we are a consumer brands business. We have leading positions in industrial as well as in consumer. Adhesive Technologies is brands like Loctite, Technomed, Bonderite. And then we are in the middle of merging beauty care and laundry care, Schwarzkopf, Dial, Persil, all. And these are exactly the brands where we have a lot of hunger, appetite for palm kernel oil-based derivatives in the surfactants area. And then if we move to the next one, please. So I think it's also important to always keep an eye on who we are with our global footprint, operating in more than 50 countries. And what I liked really a lot is that for the first time you tried to do that overall global analysis on demand and on availability of purchased RSPO ingredients. And on the same side, looking at where we have our headquarters, as you know, in Germany. Germany also is a founding member of German Forum on Sustainable Palm Oil. We saw also the Danish Alliance is already at 100% uptake. The same is, I think, true for all the members which are active in Forum Sustainable Palm Oil. However, if you see, we are also in Latin America, in Asia, Pacific, in Africa. So all the production sites are telling you that we have a very, very diverse and challenging environment. And as you can imagine, local sourcing situation differs tremendously from region to region. And that leads us to the next slide, please. First of all, we are palm kernel oil derivative users, and we are purchasing ingredients that are based on palm kernel oil and manufactured with the supply chain of our suppliers. And also, of course, we have clustered our stakeholders. We see growing external demand for assurance mainly. And since I'm with Henkel, I entered Henkel in 2003, there was always palm that accompanied me and my work here within Henkel Global Sustainability Unit as the top one priority issue that we are facing when it comes to the impacts that are coming if you are a user of palm kernel oil derivatives. So I would like to, of course, talk about assurance towards customers, maybe retailers or consumers, that I would say the RSPO supplied certification, the supply chain certification, is a key representative for most markets where we are active in. So the last production sites needs to undergo RSPO supply chain certification, and then of course also our customers are looking up if that is in place and if that is given on an annual basis and updated. And they are really also coming with more palm policies which are not harmonized on a global scale. Some are asking us for customer or supplier retailer specific mill lists, because they are asking for what we just also had. They want to have traceability back to plantation, a barcode or a blockchain technology in place that allows them to say all the ingredients within this product are safe. I don't think they are interested in all the details, but they need to have a stamp or proof that it's a tick box, that's no risk, risk to be linked to deforestation is coming with that product on the shelf. And that is also a trend that we are observing, especially in the US market, that big retailers are asking for segregated supply, though we tell and try to educate this is not possible for the time being because of why. Shared tanks, etc., and shared markets. But however, the wish for, or I would say the request for a roadmap towards segregated is more and more is coming in regular frequency. And that, of course, also impacts our the financial markets. The investor pressure has been higher to accelerate sustainable palm agenda, which is all the risk-based perspective that they take. And then next one, please. That also, I think, Emily, you had that in your, of course, the consumer apps. The consumer apps that are heavily influencing customers, especially in France, where we see it, where we have, for example, CodeCheck or Nutri-Score or whatever. But now also was a bit, to be honest, shocked to see in Germany, also supported by many, many big relevant partners, that there is an app to refuse products with palm that are linked to deforestation, but of course not full transparency, but how it works. So download the Palm app to your phone, scan a food barcode. Currently it's only for food, but I think we all have seen that next step will be non-food products, and then customers' opinion passed on to manufacturer. The more news the company gets, the better. So these are two examples of replacing apps, which are also demonstrated as best practice. And I thought this needs to be a topic to Forum Sustainable Palm Oil, to invite the EUW, to invite the companies behind that are so certain to guide consumers towards more sustainable behavior. And you see how important it is, because I think the apps are popping up more and more and leading into that direction. Next one, please. That brings me to the PALM strategy that we have started or kicked off, I think, 2008. And it's still more or less the same, that we are building on 3 blocks like compliance and certification in our markets. We are striving to be 100% responsibly sourced or externally assured in countries where RSPO material is really not available. And also we have small volumes that we are already receiving in an SG quality. However, that is really niche and to be neglected. Together with our partner, we just had the topic of partnerships because we are overwhelmed by all those external requirements. We are partnering with Action for Sustainable Derivative to specially help our sector, the oleochemical sector. I don't know, less than 6%, I think, of the overall palm market to do traceability together with our partners by an NGO, by a third party that works with questionnaires mainly, and then gets our lists where we are sourcing, and then goes step by step down our value chain, down to refinery, down to mill, and then finally also in a few cases they can say traceability down to plantation. However, that is in a mass balance concept, not to mix that up. So never ever thought about SG concepts here, because even Forum Sustainable Palm Oil as well as Action for Sustainability, these are strong, they strongly push for the mass balance, which is so crucial to survive and to see this as a transformation towards SG. However, don't know by when, but MB needs to be there. MB is more important than ever. However, there is, as we all know, the MB ambition is not high enough for meeting requirements coming with a human rights due diligence framework. And then we are proud, and I think that's also where the partnership with Solidaridad has started, that our social impact and nature conservation pillar, where we always started from scratch to do one-on-one partnerships together with the partners on the ground, as well as IVH or the Danish government. So several partners within that ambition to improve smallholder livelihoods in different regions. We do this in 7 countries. And we were always striving to come up with a first physical link to one of our smallholder projects and have at least a poor draw, or I would say a small quantity of sustainable smallholder produced drops in our own products. And then also the digital farming solutions need to be mentioned, which was especially designed for the Colombian market, where we allow our consumers and farmers to work on their smartphones. And that's a nice example, which I could bring here to that extent, attention, because that has worked out. And that is, for me, this is a clear success story to have it after three years of development. Next one, please. Action for Sustainable Derivative has been mentioned, and I think it's crucial to know that these are the partners who help us to drive our roadmap towards traceability, a collaborative organization by BSR and Transition, with a shared objective to pass through NDPE principles, respects human rights, and support local livelihoods. However, it's not really integrated in the scorecard, I think, by now that we have just seen, because the positioning is difficult, because of course, individual partners who are members of this initiative, of course, we get our results that we improve our traceability score together with a cloud of other members. But as you know, it's not really demonstrated in all scorecards to talk about the small progress that you reach via those initiatives, where you talk more about a cloud or industry initiative than individual company results. Next one, please. So in short, the smallholder story, where we are thinking that's one we want to bring also to attention of other peers and partners. Why? Because we were having a quantitative target. You talked about implementation on the ground, investing. And I think that's something that stands out, that we early on committed to do more than 100% of our demand, which we have physically in our supply chain, to support in the same volume smallholders, to also measure yields and improvements. And then you see on the right that we have reached via those projects in 7 countries more than 30,000 in total, which 300 hectares and more than 100,000 tons of sustainable palm, which is more or less the Henkel global footprint, and also could see nice yield and also income increases. Next one, please. Yeah, and that is the one I would like to bring your attention out of those 7 projects, at least in Colombia, where I already mentioned we had that digital solution in place. We succeeded in now supporting a project which I really do love. It's called Farm to Bar, where we have a logo, Solidaridad. We support local farmers on pack for our dial bar soaps. And as you can see, for the first time, we have a full supply chain with 520 farmers and Oleoflores partner and Hada that produce together 18,000 tons of certified sustainable palm oil. And that can be then really linked to the products you see on the right. And that has been the first and only, which I think more than 3 years of development and preparation, GIZ and other partners in place. But it was huge, I would say, effort to have that. And we are more than proud that those products will enter the shelf in the US. Next one, please. I think you did a much better and profound improvement needs list, but also we are having our, of course, own thoughts about these challenges that we see. And also we see our first one is the switch from transparency that we currently believe to have in place to traceability, exactly as you've pointed out earlier. And then we are really lagging behind with our PKO different upstream and production traceability features that are available currently. And then also we believe that from the responsive grievance mechanism, we should have a more proactive approach to high conservation value areas preservation, to proactively approach land use in region in other growing countries. And then, of course, we are a bit, we don't know why. We have, of course, several thoughts about it, but maybe my colleague Ashwin can also comment on that. Of course, not only seeing that RSPO is not growing, though we thought, and that's for so many years in a row, that's, of course, even worse for palm kernel oil users. And therefore, derivatives sector is facing inherent limitations created by trading, spot market, dilution of volumes, and so on. So therefore, we really believe we need to have some support here, and we are believing in mass balance, as said earlier, and therefore we are so pleased to see that the ASD brought up that MB approach to the resolution that has been, I think, adopted by the RSPO, which says more or less that we need to not only speak about MB, but also have a certain minimum standard for the conventional oil, which is in the controlled mixing concept. And I think I'm done with all my slides, or is there one summing up, Marike? Oh, the options and alternatives. And I think this is just thinking loud. Of course, we don't know about future developments and further scarcity and bans and grievances, etc. But of course, the field is getting much more tight. First of all, and I think that pleases RSPO, we believe in each and every country, we need to strengthen the reputation and the RSPO standard through stakeholder engagement, exactly what we are doing here now together. And the resolution was so crucial to us to make a MB scheme more robust that I think I mentioned it 3 times now. And because of the upcoming directive that will even push for human rights, climate preservation features even stronger. And therefore, in the end, we believe it's not good to have all those different mosaic standards in place and every company does its own pick sorting and believing in piece. We believe it should be one corporate standard who has incorporated the new requirements and is on par with the global developments to overcome the barriers, especially to the EU market entry. And then which alternatives do we see ensuring due diligence obligations? There was one example that I should come to an end, Marike, did you say that? Okay, so yeah, Indonesia Nucleus Estate as a smallholder for the local implementation, we believe needs to accelerate, is not at 20% where it should be, and then the research in alternative feedstocks is just to reduce overall pressure on palm. And with this, I'm done and happy to to receive questions.
Thank you, Christine. Very impressive, and impressive how you tell about your commitment and how you invest in work and impact on the ground. I know that it's with Solidaridad, so it's kind of self-promoting maybe, but yeah. I'm still impressed actually. Lesson to self is timekeeping. I see we have questions, but also we have the presentation of Ashwin still up. So I propose we move to Ashwin's presentations, and then we'll do some more questions and looking at the Q&A. To the audience, you can vote questions of others up, but we'll be short on time, so let me know which ones you prefer, and then we'll address that at the end. So please, Ashwin, take it away.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Marike, for inviting us to be part of this discussion. It's great to be on the panel with partners like IFECA and members, Henkel and WWF, who've been strong supporters of the RSPO over the years. So it's been since we are running out of time, I'll try to be as short as possible. So I think most of the audience is familiar with the RSPO. We are a multi-stakeholder organization with 7 stakeholder categories, members representing 7 stakeholder categories. We've been in existence since 2004, trying to advance the cause of sustainable palm oil globally. This is just a snapshot of some numbers of our impact thus far. So we have about over 5,000 members, spanning over 100 countries. And as has already been pointed out, approximately 19% of the global production is certified, and we're still working towards increasing that. And as again was pointed out, we've kind of been stagnant there, and we can touch upon what we are doing to get over that if we have time. So since we touched upon the mass balance and the segregated scheme, so I think it was just wanted to give you an update on share some information on the different supply chain models, and also go a bit further on mass balance and the potential benefits that it offers. So as we know, RSPO has 4 different supply chain models in identity preserved, wherein you can trace back to one certified source. Segregated supply chains, where there's a mixing of certified materials along the supply chain. Then comes mass balance, where material is mixed with certified and non-certified. And then last but not least, you have the credits and the book and claim model, wherein there is no physical link between your sourcing, but it's more like your carbon trading, where you offset your usage of conventional palm oil by purchasing credits. And there again, you can buy credits from independent smallholders. I'm running through it very quickly, assuming that you're familiar with it. But if any of you are not familiar with these, please reach out to me later on, and I'm happy to go and explain this over in much more detail. So just focusing on the mass balance supply chain model, as Christine pointed out, it's one of the RSPO supply chain models, which allows mixing of certified and non-certified materials. The mixing of certified and non-certified materials can happen at any point in the supply chain. So the infographic that you see here just shows that there is a mill in green, which is RSPO certified. There can be a conventional mill, which is not certified. The oil from both of these mills gets into the ship when it's being transported to the refinery. So the mixing happens beyond the mill. And the same thing can happen beyond the refinery as well. A refinery can source segregated materials, and then the refinery and the customer of the refinery could mix that materials with non-certified, and then the mass balance could happen there. So this is your typical mass balance chains that most people would be familiar with, but it's important to also understand that the mass balance mixing can also happen at the mill level. So just before I go there, just reiterate. So here in this case, the mill is certified, segregated, identity preserved, and then the oil mixing of the oil happens much later in the supply chain. In this case, there is a RSPO certified mill, which is mass balanced. The mill has its own plantations, which could potentially be certified. So let's assume that the capacity of the mill is 800 metric tons, of which 300 metric tons of CPO comes from their own plantations, which are completely certified. But the mill, if the mill has to run as IP, then the mill will have to run at lower than their full capacity, which implies cost. So what typically happens is the mill also, in order to cover that gap, the mill sources conventional fresh fruit bunches from people, plantations, and farmers around the mill. So typically, the ones who are supplying to the mills are independent smallholders, and independent smallholders are farmers who own less than 50 hectares of land and who are not tied to a particular mill. So they are pretty much independent. They're free to decide what to do with their land. So the mixing of the fresh fruit bunches happens at the mill. So whatever that enters into the supply chain at the mill level is already mass balance certified. So this is a different model. This is also mass balance, but it's important to understand that the previous model, this mixing happens later in the supply chain, and this model, the mill mixing of the fresh conventional certified, happens at the mill itself. Just to give an indication of the volumes, because you can see a snapshot. Again, this is something, the data you can find on our website. Approximately over 50% of the total certified volumes, which is the actual production of FFB that is certified as RSPO, has been certified as mass balance, which means there are mass balance mills that are also sourcing from independent smallholders or scheme smallholders or other plantations that are not certified. So there is already mixing of certified and conventional for over 50% of our certified volumes. So, sorry.
When I'm impressed with, everybody's always saying that, the RSPO certified volume is kind of stable and plateauing, but here you see quite a clear growth. How do you see that?
Yeah, there's been a growth in absolute numbers, but it's also important to realize the stagnancy is in terms of the percentages, because your total production of palm globally is also increasing. So even though there is growth in absolute numbers, so what you see here is growth in absolute numbers, which is also reflected in our growth and our membership, right? So our membership has also grown over the years. Our uptake has also grown over the years in terms of absolute numbers, but in terms of percentages, we continue to remain stagnant.
Yeah.
At this point. So so the point is that there's over 50% of the volume of certified materials comes from mass balance certified mills. So that's important to note when we are discussing whether mass balance is an effective tool for transformation. And clearly, if we move towards segregated, what that implies is that all of these mills that are supplying that mass balance oil and are supporting independent smallholders will potentially be left out of the supply chain. So in conclusion, mass balance model allows for transformation at scale because it allows the millers and also the rest of the supply chain actors to engage with producers and supply chain actors or peers who are not certified. Because if you don't engage them, you would that excluding them from the supply chain is not going to help in the transformation. You need to engage, and mass balance is a way to engage people who are not on the sustainable journey. So it is an effective model, and it will help us improve, bring scale. The other important thing is to remember is that smallholders managed, as Kamal and Christine have rightly pointed out, they play an important part in the global palm oil supply chain. They manage over 40% of the land that is cultivated globally, and in some regions it's as high as 80 or 90%. And in a country like India, which is getting into domestic production, it's pretty much all smallholder production that happens here. So if we want to really transform the sector, it is not going to be possible to exclude smallholders. It's important that we think about smallholders and devise systems and be okay with systems that are not perfect, but are inclusive, because that's the only way to bring about change. So mass balance is a model that allows to include smallholders in sustainable supply chains and offers an opportunity for improving their livelihood as well. And the other thing to remember is the global markets, the southern markets like India and China. I think I saw some comments about the markets and the demand, and Emily pointed out the decreasing role of influence of the European Union, Europe in terms of the volumes. So the global markets, I mean, we are facing stiff challenges in terms of lack of awareness, and there's no enabling environment as it is in Europe in this case, where there's a push from the government, there's awareness. So all of these different levers of change do not exist in these markets. So it's quite difficult to get to incentivize companies to move towards sustainable sourcing. So that's where models like RSPO credits and mass balance, which are more cost effective for companies, offer an opportunity for bringing about the change. So, I mean, identity preserved and segregated supply chains are preferable where possible in markets like Europe. And they may look very perfect because they offer you full traceability and visibility into your supply chains. But it's all, but in pursuing that perfect option, we should not throw away what's the good option, which is your mass balance option. And these mass balance, I believe, is it's an agent of change for the Indian and the Chinese markets. So I'll stop there. And if thanks for your attention, and happy to take any questions, or we can discuss more about India, China, and other regions if there's time.
Thanks, Ashwin, and thanks for stepping in last minute and doing an impressive job of really bringing this content forward. It's complicated and technical stuff, but yeah, I guess we're all learning that we need these models to transform the market. Time is rushing by. I do see the question of Natalie Langford, which I think is really relevant. So I'll hope I can take a few minutes to see if we can answer that. It is for Kamal and Ashwin. What are the specific challenges and obstacles faced in collaborating with the national initiatives in Indonesia and Malaysia? Are these standards appropriate frameworks? Now the question's out of my screen.
Sorry, I think I was just answering it like in the chat, but I can say the answer what I just typed.
Great.
So what I just typed there was to say that it is very important to realize that national legal standards have a role to play. So we must continue working, whether it's ISPO or MSPO, because that raises the bar for the entire industry. But also keeping RSPO as the ambition, since that is the closest that meets the NDP requirements of many companies and multinationals around the world. So the idea would be like our Malaysia office, for example, was working very closely to improve the MSPO standards. And that's what we have been doing with our partners, but realizing that no standard is perfect. So there is a continuous improvement for whether it's RSPO, MSPO, ISPO, or anything else for that matter. So no perfect standard, so therefore a step-by-step approach, but realizing that RSPO has the closest requirements for the NDP commitments made by most multinationals.
Thank you. Ashwin, do you want to add?
No, just to say that we welcome these developments, the national standards, and there is already ongoing collaboration with ISPO, for instance, in Indonesia, and we are working on collaborating with the MSPO standards where possible. So we do definitely see these as a welcome development, and it's important that we build on these initiatives and not try to go our separate ways. I mean, we've been talking about partnership all along this webinar, right from the beginning. So that's precisely what we aim to do.
Thank you. Thank you. I see Margot's question kind of build on that. Would at some point be possible for ISPO and MSPO and other schemes to be recognized in mass balance, provided that they meet criteria? Oh, that's quite a putting you on the spot there. Sorry.
No, I think I think we should. This is something that needs to be discussed with ISPO and MSPO. We need to sort of look at the benchmarking of these different standards and where we stand, how we compare with each other. But definitely, I think where, as I said earlier, I mean, if there's an opportunity to build on the MSPO and ISPO and integrate that into the RSPO supply chains, I think that would be the ideal way forward to bring scale. It's probably already happening because there are MSPO certified farmers and ISPO certified farmers that are supplying into RSPO certified mills. So it's already happening. It's just a matter of when we accept that and come up with a, put a label to it, I think. So I don't have a clear answer to you, Marco. It's something we'll have to work on with our colleagues from MSPO and ISPO. And
Thank you. Okay, guys, I see it's time. Time was really fast today, as it always seems to be. What I've learned is that the market uptake from Europe is, we need to keep that strong. But we need to have more attention for how do we actually drive impacts on the ground. The mass balance model can be a way, collaboration with national standards can be a way, and we need to think about that and make sure we take people along in this journey. I hope that this webinar played a part in that. We'll make a recording and make that available. We'll make the clips again as we do. So at this point, I want to thank the speakers for being here. Emily, Kamal, Ashwin, and in particular Christine for bearing with all the technical challenges and making sure you got there eventually despite the challenges. And also our technical hosting team. Thanks everybody. Thanks for this SPOC webinar again. And yeah, I'm sorry for those questions we didn't answer, but I guess that's always the limitation. And yeah, looking forward to be in touch with you everywhere where we come. And for now, thank you very much and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marika. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Emily. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thank you, Marike.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Really. Tschüss.